Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Music Den. I'm your host, Armando Venditti. Hoping you guys are having a good day. And above all else, that you are looking after yourselves and one another. And that your computers are working and however you're watching this. And because believe me, yesterday I had issues, but we won't go into it. Ladies and gentlemen, before I get into the topic of another yet fantastic episode on the Music Den, I want to welcome back to the channel Mr. Jim Brecker. How's it going, Jim?
I'm doing all right, but man, my issues have issues, so don't remind me.
I hear you. I hear you. And the one and only Ken Cheshire with his thingamajiggy. How's it going, Ken?
Going well. This is my thingamajiggy, my fidget spinner. So
There you go.
There we go.
It's
anyway,
fidget spinner. Ladies and gentlemen, we
Thank
want
you
to
for
welcome.
clarifying.
I
Yeah,
I I I fidget, therefore I am. Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to welcome you to All That in 1982. We are finishing up our series looking back on albums released in 1982. Um, yeah, this is a hell of a list. And we were going through the list before we started taping as to what albums we could talk about, what albums we really knew, and what albums we were like, I have no freaking idea what's going on with these albums. But we're going to bring this to you and we're going to have fun with this. So I am going to call out album titles from 1982, and each of us are going to give their reaction to it. All right, as I look at my list here, Prince, 1999. Jim.
Ah, the monster, the thing that broke him wide open.
Yeah.
Um, I've never listened to this album all the way through. Um, this came out like right at the end of high school and began to sort of really climb up the charts of influence in college. But, again, I've never listened to the whole thing. I guess I felt like I never really had the need to. I mean, side one was all singles, and those were the ones that you heard people playing out of their boom boxes, if you will. And the rest of it, it's like I'm looking at the titles here. Let's pretend we're married. Automatic. All the critics love you in New York. Um, I have no concept of any of those songs. Side one, it's an absolute banger, just stuffed with hits in its three tracks. But side two and three and four, I wouldn't know them if I tripped over them. I mean, I'm sure they're consistent with what was on side one, just because this album has so many so many people who just praise it from stem to stern. Um, but I have no horse in this race.
Okay. All right. Ken.
I can pretty much say basically the same thing. I have heard it all the way through, but it's probably hasn't been since it was released. So yeah, but those songs that Jim mentioned really do stand out. And whereas I'm not the biggest Prince fan, um, that's some good stuff right there. Seriously.
Okay.
You want to fill a dance floor back in the day, you put on 1999.
Yes. Yes, definitely. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, my recollection of this album, this was the first time I ever heard of Prince with the 1999 video. Um, and my first thought was, what the hell is this? This is great. Um, his fifth album, there was some concern from Warner Brothers about it being a double album, 11 tracks in total. Uh, yeah, some markets they released the album, like in Colombia, they released it as 1999 Volume 1 and Volume 2 because they didn't want to, they thought it would be too much to release a double album in in that market. And word to everyone listening out there, if you're a teenager or, you know, Just word
Or
to
if you
mouth.
identify as a teenager.
Or you identify as a teenager. Never play Let's Pretend We're Married on a school trip with your teacher around. It doesn't work. Okay.
Hmm,
Um,
a bit salacious, are you suggesting?
well, there's a section, an instrumental section where you hear him whispering, "I want up you. I want
Oh,
up,
okay.
I want up the taste out of your mouth." That's yeah. You don't want to, don't even go there. But the album for me is pop and R&B confection perfection. I mean, I've always loved 1999, the track, and all of these tracks are the extended versions. Side two with Let's Pretend We're Married, which was a single, I do believe in Australia. DMSR, Dance Music Sex Romance, banger all the way through. Side three starts off with Automatic, which again was a single in Australia. Fantastic track. Fantastic track. Uh, Lady Cab Driver. The middle section, you know what I'm talking about. Um, Jojo,
Actually, I don't, and I'm just gonna guess, extrapolate based on what I know about Mr. Rogers and how he.
let's just say Jill Jones puts in a wonderful performance in terms of vocal overdubs and screams and orgasms. Let's just put it that way.
Hey,
Um,
Meg Ryan would be proud. Okay.
there you go. She would put Meg Ryan to shame. Uh, the album from top to bottom is pretty much banger. Um, this was Prince starting to experiment with songs like All the Critics Love You in New York, Something in the Water, Does Not Compute. Again, very experimental. This was him using the Lindrum machine to its fullest. Uh, and he would pull away from it going into like with albums like All Around the World in a Day. Slowly, he would go back to more organic and live instrumentation. But this is Prince in full flight, obviously pre Purple Rain, but this was also where Prince was still considered somewhat underground, where fans could claim him as his own to an extent, Ken, to an extent. Um, but this is the album that broke him open, triple platinum sales. Fantastic, fantastic album. Um, yeah, that's really all I can say about that. I said enough about it, but yeah. Okay. Um, let's move on. Hmm. Bruce Springsteen, Nebraska.
Well, all
Ken.
right, all right, all right.
I'll go with Ken this time again.
Okay. Um, Nebraska. I've got mixed feelings about this album. Uh, it's 82. That was his first album after The River. This was really him taking a turn in another direction. Um, whether you want to call it Heartland or Americana or whatever. I like it, but I miss the whole New Jersey vibe. You know, I mean, it does have Atlantic City and some stuff on there that fit, but I still prefer primarily Springsteen. You know, a little bit harder than this, but this was a good turn for him. I think this is some of his best work. I certainly like it better than Born in the USA. Um, so yeah, I think I owned it once. I just didn't give it a lot of listen other than the singles, and I usually heard those on the radio. But
Mhm. Mhm.
it's a solid album. And I probably need to go back and give it another shot because I'm in a different place in life than I was back then. And I do really like, his Western Stars album, which is very different from the New Jersey stuff.
Yeah, I have
But,
Western Stars. It's a good one too. Yeah.
uh, well, yeah, and we'll talk about that at some other time. But yeah, it's good. I know I have several friends that this is their favorite Springsteen album, and you know what? I get it. It was a unexpected turn when I bought it, but I think it was a good turn.
Okay. Jim.
Well, my experience with this record goes back to when it was released, and I was 17 at the time. And this was before obviously the internet. And so when the album dropped, you were kind of dependent upon word of mouth or what you heard on the radio related to, what an album would be. And I listened to it and I was just like, what? What the heck is this? I remember
Yeah.
writing a review for my high school newspaper saying it was like this huge missed opportunity because the songs could have benefited from the drama and the scope of the arrangement of the E Street Band. Um, One of the things I would like to do if I had a time machine is go back and take that 17-year-old and smack him upside the head because he clearly didn't know what the heck he was talking about. Um, this album is, remains a radical, left turn from where he was going. And whether you're talking about the subject matter of the songs, the just the production. I mean, this was what done on a four-track Tascam in his bedroom,
Yeah.
basically, and
Yeah.
that's what they used to master the album with.
Mhm.
Um, so, so I get why people in the music business who are just like really close to this stuff thought that this was just absolutely fantastic. And I've now sort of caught up to that view, but it took a long time to get there. Mostly it took people reinterpreting the songs. Um,
Mhm.
Cowboy Junkies have done a few cover versions from this album. Specifically, State Trooper comes to mind from their 200 More Miles album, which is just mwah, live album spotlight, Armando. Make a note. Um, and then more
Okay.
recently, there was a full there's a lady named O'Donovan, or maybe it's Aoife. I think it's Aoife O'Donovan. Aoife is how you spell her first name. She did a full like stem to stern cover of the entire Nebraska album, just her and an acoustic guitar. It sounds like it was recorded in front of a campfire. I kid you not. And it really opened my eyes a bit more to the depth of the songwriting of this whole album. Because the one thing that you can say about Nebraska consistently is that it's a bleak MFer. I mean, this is not Sherry Darlin. This is not the ties that bind. I mean, it's really, really bleak. Having Aoife record it, just the soprano nature of her voice, the single acoustic guitar, just the way she handles a melody really made the album kind of more palatable for me. And it just kind of opened its eyes that it's not just, well, it's bleak, but handled well, you can offset that bleakness. And I think Aoife's recording of the album just really hits it out of the park and has made me appreciate the original all that much more. I believe there's a film coming out or some sort of biography about the Nebraska album um, that was done as part of I don't remember this guy's first name, but Zanes is his last name. I think he wrote a book about Nebraska, and I think it's called Deliver Me from Nowhere, and it's going to be coming out soonish, I hope. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that, to learn a bit more about what went into the album, Springsteen's fascinations with Charles Starkweather, John Steinbeck, etc. So
Yeah.
I've said a lot, I feel like.
Not you. Never you. No. No. Um, yeah, I do remember this album. Uh, to me, this album got more attention just after the release of Born in the USA, because people started to go back and reevaluate and look at the albums again, The River, etc. And I do remember Atlantic City. I do remember it being stark, being really dark image wise. Bleak is a good way just to describe it. The references to the end of that, the sorry, references to the serial killer who went on the rampage,
Starkweather?
Starkweather, who went on a rampage with his girlfriend to see how many people he could kill before they would, before he was stopped. It's as bleak as you can get for the at the time. And he, to me, just wanted to go in the opposite direction of what he created with the river. I mean, he had a massive tour with the river. Uh, he's with the river. He was listed as having the longest concert ever on record, 4 hours at Maple Leaf Gardens, which my brother-in-law actually did go to at the time. I know you're watching, Carmen,
Nice.
yeah, Carmen loves Springsteen. But yeah, I do remember Atlantic City as a single. I loved Atlantic City.
Yeah.
The vocal overdubs on the choruses, etc. I just very haunting. And I think this was an album he needed to make for his own sanity. You know what I mean? Like his own sake and sanity. So, and to me, he was rebelling against what was expected of him at the time. So, yeah, that's my take on Nebraska. All right.
That's quite a dichotomy between Prince and Springsteen there. Good choosing, Armando.
Thank you, my dear boy. Thank you. All right. I will continue here. Uh, oh, from one end
Oh,
to the other. Laurie Anderson, Big Science.
Ooh.
Jim.
Oh dear. This is pretty much in the Prince camp. I mean, a lot of the songs I learned afterwards. I remember hearing "Oh Superman" at the time it came out, and I just couldn't make it through all 8 minutes of it, of just the all the way through. And a lot of these songs were released on in other forms on the United States album, which was her. Yeah, that was the subsequent release from this one, which was 4 LPs, if memory serves right. Um, and a lot of the pieces that were in here were kind of reworked for that, one woman show format, or chiefly one woman show. Um, yeah, I mean, this is another one that I think I've heard all the way through, but I have, I'm like Gandalf. I have no memory of this place. I Sorry, man.
Okay. Ken.
so, Jim, are you saying this is minimalist?
There are certainly parts of it that are.
Okay. I got nothing on this. I recognize the cover, but that's it.
Have you ever heard "Oh Superman"?
No,
I've heard of the song. I've never
I
really
didn't grow
paid
up in
attention.
civilization like you did. So, yeah, no. I grew up in the South.
He was sheltered. Okay, I really
There's a difference between sheltered and under a rock.
true enough.
Ugh.
Well, you caught me with that one. You You sneaky bastard. Okay. You caught me with that one. I I remember hearing the name of the album. She was always considered avant-garde artist, uh, very much thinking outside the box kind of an artist. She does have a new album out called Amelia that I've listened to that I can't really get my head around. I don't have any recollections of this album whatsoever. Um, I do know that there's performances is it live in the USA, Jim? The album
It's called United States Live.
United States Live, yes. And I wanted to dive into this now into her music, and I wanted to get a copy of this, but at the point I looked on Discogs, it was too rich for my blood. No, for this album though, I have no recollection as to what it's about. Um, so I don't want to, belabor the pain. You know, it's like slowly pulling a tooth out when you know you're in pain. Just fucking pull it out. But we,
Well, I can tell you that later in Lori's discography, Mr. Heartbreak, which came out in '84, I think is completely approachable. I think it's more musical than kind of performance art, which is what this album, if I recall right, is can be mostly categorized as. Um, Mr. Heartbreak has Adrian Belew, it has Peter Gabriel. Um, it's a fantastic album. The tour that she did, it's kind of
yeah,
supporting that record called Home of the Brave. That is a fantastic concert movie. Sadly, it's out of print, but I think you can find it, you know, illicit viewings of it on YouTube. Um, Absolutely phenomenal. I was a pretty big Laurie Anderson fan, and actually did get the chance to see her live in this little tiny club in San Francisco called Slim's. This would have been like '89 or so, and it's a club that holds 300 people. And the next night she played like the Berkeley Community Theater, which holds like 3,000. So she was kind of going through this phase of just doing different size venues in different cities and doing different kinds of performances based on the venue size. And it was like a whole mixed media thing where, she would, and it was solely a one woman show, and, have very good memories from that night. She forbade photography during the performance, but she did hand out giant 11 by 17 sheets of sketch paper and
Mhm.
pencils. So if people wanted to do a drawing of the night, they were more than welcome to.
Okay,
So I thought that was hilarious.
A little
interesting.
bit too California for me.
Okay.
So
Look,
Jim,
Bubba,
what would you compare this to?
the Big Science album.
Yeah.
The only real point of comparison I have would be United States Live, which I have heard the whole thing, and it's performance art augmented by music
Okay.
and technology. She has this thing where she puts a vocoder in her mouth and just it lights up and it makes this awfully weird
Yeah,
sound. And when
that's
you
what I
see it
remember.
performed, it looks like part of her skull is illuminated.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what I remember.
Performance art. Okay, that tells me.
yeah.
Okay.
She also, I mean, back in the day, you probably remember, people that might have those skinny ties with like piano keys on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a part of her performances where she actually had that wired up and she played her tie as if it were a piano. I mean, so there's lots of strangeness like that.
Yeah.
Okay. I get
Okay.
it.
But the film is really worth seeing. Adrian Belew was on the tour as well, and boy, it's so. Adrian is already a ton of fun to watch, but in this context, he's even more goofy and outrageous. It's wonderful.
Okay. All right. Moving on, ladies and gentlemen. Daryl Hall and John Oates, H2O. We're going all over the map this time, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, it's like watching a ping pong tournament.
I just remember the single was, Man Eater. Uh, this was all over the radio. This was them when they hit I think, their creative peak. Um, of course, 2 years later, they would release Big, Big Bang Boom. Sorry, can't say that quickly. With production by Arthur Baker on Out of Touch, the lead off track. Um, but yeah, this was where, Hall and Oates from the mid 70s on with the Atlantic releases, or early to mid 70s with the Atlantic releases with Sarah Smile and Rich Girl, and then sang to RCA with Voices, and then with releasing Voices, and then Private Eyes, and then H2O. It just seemed that to me they hit they arrived at this point with this album, and Magneto was all over the radio, all over the charts. They did release a single cover of Mike Oldfield's Family Man, which we had the single of, but I flipped the B side over and I liked Italian Girls, which was the B side to the onto the
I'm
track.
shocked. Shocked, I tell you.
And there you go. There you go. With John Oates on lead vocals, I'm doing a fantastic job. Um, to me, this is their uh, perfection confection in terms of a pop oriented album. Yeah, they were on fire at this point. Yeah. Ken?
Yeah, I agree. Whereas they did have some hits on the previous album, Private Eyes, I think this really threw them into the top. A little bit too poppy for me. Um, the Hall and Oates album that really, there's a few that really come to mind. But Along the Red Ledge is one that I really like. And surprise, surprise, it's not very commercial. Um, yeah, my taste just kind of ran other than top 40 at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
At the same time, these are the college years, so I had um, my exposure to music was sporadic at best. Probably, chances are if I gave this album a whole listen to, what I would like best would probably be the deep tracks, you
yeah,
know. So, but yeah, but I just remember reading, uh, like over the last 10 or 15 years or so, how the record label was really pushing them, for hits and stuff like that, and
yeah.
that uh,
I'm gonna
these weren't
interject.
really the material they wanted to do. They
Yeah,
wanted to do more of the blue-eyed soul and stuff.
let me just interject something here really quickly with what you were saying, Ken. Um, just like a few years before in 1980, like 79, 80, you had Daryl Hall wanting to break away from John Oates and wanting to go off and do his own solo stuff. And he did the album with, now the name escapes me, with Robert
Robert
Fripp
Fripp.
producing, with Robert Fripp producing. And there was talk of him and Robert Fripp forming a band together with Tony Levin, right? And but RCA was pushing him back towards John Oates, and you're contractually obligated to do this, and we got to get you out there, and in terms of I guess you call it 6 degrees of separation, because of the list that we have here. Todd Rundgren produced one of their Atlantic albums
Yep,
for Hall and Oates since I believe it was what 74. I do have it on vinyl,
there's War
but
Babies, right?
um,
Probably.
Yeah,
I believe so. Something
yeah.
what I do remember the name Luncheonette.
Abandoned
I don't
Luncheonette.
think that was that
No,
Todd's album, Abandoned Luncheonette?
I don't
I
think
b-
so.
I believe
Yeah.
so. Yeah, because I have it on vinyl. So
No.
Daryl Hall was always wanting to do something different and break out of the top 40 or the pop stuff. Uh,
Mhm.
I mean, the Blue Eyed Soul is where they got their name and what they're known for. So,
Sure.
um, but to me, this was them at their pinnacle. Uh, After Big Bang Boom, they started to go, they petered down popularity. But
And just to close the loop, R.F. Martin produced Abandoned Luncheonette.
Right.
Todd produced War Babies.
oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. Okay. My mistake. All right.
Hey, we're human.
I knew that Rundgren was in there somewhere, so all
Yeah.
right.
War Babies.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Number 5 on the list, Joni Mitchell, While Things Run Fast.
This is an obvious Jim starter.
You'd think so, but no. I have nothing to say about this record. You're like batting 1,000 today, Armando. You keep picking these albums that we
Okay.
don't have much context for. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember the album when it came out, and I remember people thinking, "This is kind of a step backwards." Um,
I've heard
Not
this.
as much of a step backward as like Dog Eat Dog, which was produced by Thomas Dolby, but um,
I've heard some of this album, and I tend to think that it was more her trying to like trying to be current with the trends of the music scene at the time.
mhm.
Myself, I don't remember it like to any great extent. Um, you know, but Ken,
There's some pretty good pedigree as far as musicians.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, I've never been um, a huge fan of hers. I've only recently really kind of started going back in time and diving into it, but this one's yeah, that's interesting. Well, Jim, this came after Shadows and Light, so I'm surprised you're not more familiar with it. Was
Well,
there
for me,
a
the
reason?
entry point, well, yeah, a couple of reasons. One, I remember seeing like some feature on HBO or Showtime around the time that this came out, and I just didn't connect with the music. It wasn't until like '85 or so that I was introduced to Shadows and Light, and my point of entry
Ah,
there was
got it.
Matheny, Jocko, Lyle Mays,
Got
folks
it.
like that. And so it's that was kind of the start of my Joni
I got
journey.
it.
And then
I
it's
got it.
only in the past like 5 years with all the archives that have come out where I've just said, holy
Okay.
Lord, what have I been missing? Um,
Okay.
this album, I'm just reading from, Wikipedia here, saying Mitchell's claiming that her inspiration came from hearing the music of like Steely Dan, Talking Heads, and the Police. Specifically, she said about the Police, she was saying like their rhythmic hybrids, the positioning of the drums, the sound of the drums. That was one of the main calls out to her to make a more rhythmic album. And you're right. The musicians on this album are just crazy talented.
Yeah.
Larry Klein, Steve Lukather, Vinnie Colaiuta, Don Elias, Wayne Shorter, Larry Carlton, Victor Feldman. I mean, it's reads like Steely Dan credits, all in there pretty much.
Yeah.
Um, and it's probably worth a revisit as I
Yeah, I'm curious
try to
now.
reassess. Yeah.
okay,
Okay.
all right.
Okay.
What else to pick here? Let's see, King Crimson with Beat.
Oh yeah, I can talk about that.
All right, Jim, go ahead.
So
25
this
words or
is
less.
so this is the second of the '80s trilogy. This was the one that followed Discipline, and many of the tracks that are standouts on this album were developed during the Discipline period. Um, uh, yeah, I think they performed. Geez, why is it failing on me? Oh gosh darn it! I hate being old. I have to look at the track list really quick because it's just not coming up for me. So, Waiting Man, Sartorian Tangier and Neurotica were two of the tunes that they were performing on the road when they were supporting Discipline. So they were kind of road tested at that point. and the rest of the tunes that came about on the album, like Neil and Jack and Me, um, Waiting Man, Howler, Requiem, a lot of that stuff got developed in the studio. But this was an album that was incredibly difficult to make and almost broke the band up because it was just so stressful trying to have the music come to life, and to have it be within the confines of what Fripp wanted for that Discipline band, but yet be kind of new and original as well. They didn't want to make something that was just Discipline Part Two, but in a way they kind of ended up doing that. And it's it's a difficult album to get into if you're
Hmm.
not uh familiar with Crimson, because this was the first album that I had heard from them. And my friend Andy had said, I was talking to him about this, and I said, well, what should I get? Should I get Discipline or Beat? And he's like, oh, you got to get Beat. Beat's a better album. And I listened to it, and Neil and Jack and Me comes on with these polyrhythmic interlocked guitars and just these strange sounds coming from not only the guitar but the stick as well. It was just a real Laurie Anderson, going back to her for a minute, has this little bit that she calls difficult listening hour. And this is very much in that wheelhouse of difficult listening because it's just so outside of like what you would normally hear on radio.
Yeah.
Even Heartbeat, which is just, an out and out pop song, they're doing weird things on it. And, it's kind of I don't know, it's like something to hang on to that's like, okay, I get what's kind of going on here, even though it sounds a little weird. But then you
Mhm.
get right into Sartori and Tangier and you're off into like, you know, crazy, this crazy nexus of modern prog metal with
Yeah.
via verve jazz. I mean, it's just out there. But um having said all that, once you're kind of used to it, this album is like half outstanding and the other half is just kind of meh. um
Yeah.
so side one is where all the goods are for me, and side two is just kind of fills the space.
How much did producer Rhett Davies have to do with that?
You mean having it be difficult?
Yeah.
I don't know, Ken. My guess is not much, because he was kind of he was just sort of the unfortunate soul who was in the wrong place at the right time to try to put this together. I mean, from what I've read, he wasn't even around very much because he was busy finishing the Roxy Music record, Avalon, and like there was his wife was about to deliver their first child or something like that. So there was a lot of time where he really wasn't around, and who knows how much added stress that brought into the sessions.
So they were
Um,
sort of left to their own devices.
Yeah, and their devices at the time, there were a lot of sparks spinning between them because, like I said, it was difficult. I guess this album was the product of hard labor,
Hmm.
and even Fripp doesn't like it so much. But having said that, there are certain tunes from it that have been resurrected recently by the final Crim that toured in the late 2010s, and they did a version of Neurotica that would just slay all comers. I mean, it's just outstanding.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well,
All right.
so
And
Davies having produced Discipline, um, do you think maybe he was more hands-on during Discipline, therefore it went smoother?
I think Discipline went smoother because Fripp came in with this vision kind of wholly formed of what he wanted the record to sound like. And
Mhm.
they, tested a lot of it and rehearsed it and really got things kind of going. So there was a very strong vision, and things kind of grew organically out of the rehearsals, and it became very easy to record, even though it was very challenging music. I mean, everyone was, I mean, I think we talked about this probably the 31 Perfect Albums episode, where every one of those musicians was like the top of the class of their instrument. And so it wasn't a question of could they play this stuff. It was a question of how do they work well together to make it sound
It sounds to
good.
me egos were clashing quite a bit, and
That's not what I
in
recall.
terms of, I think in terms of musical ideas, um, possibly. I mean,
No, I think it's more of like, and Bruford kind of talks about this in some of his comments about working with King Crimson over the years, is that Fripp will come in with an idea of something that's fully formed and like perfect, if you will. And that's where you get Lark's Tongues and Aspic. That's where you get Discipline. That's where you get Thrack. But like the next albums that you try to produce from those bands, things become very, very difficult. I mean, Starless and Bible Black was recorded half live because they didn't have enough material together at time to kind of do a
okay,
whole proper studio album.
okay,
Beat was the
yeah,
same thing. It was just the kind of like the ideas run out of juice. And then for Thrack, I mean, they tried to come up with a follow-up to that, and it broke the band up. So the concept is that, you know, Fripp has this wholly formed diamond that he comes in the beginning with, and then trying to extract more out of that just becomes, extremely difficult.
mm-hmm. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, my view on the album, I knew it was out. I never really, I remember Discipline, and then I just lost touch with the band overall over the years. So I don't have anything to give you in terms of my memory of this album at all, because I don't have any of the memory
Yeah.
any memory of the album. So, um, I think,
Okay.
you know, in order to save myself some embarrassment, I will plead the fifth on that. Um, moving on, album number seven, I believe we're at. Pretty quick.
Yes, sir.
Joe Jackson, Night and Day.
Bum, bum, bum. Oh, I'm
That's
sorry. Was that out loud?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
Jim, what are your memories of Night and Day?
No, I think this album's great. Um, it's um, it's certainly, this is the second album where Joe is like, okay, I'm just going to do whatever the heck I want.
Yeah.
The album before this was Jump and Jive, which is, kind of his Cab Calloway, Louis Jordan, covers album. And this is just, piano, bass, drums, percussion, no guitar. Um, and there were two keyboardists, two percussionists, and a bass player on the tour.
Yeah.
And this whole album kind of feels the cover, which is a Hirschfeld drawing. I mean,
yeah.
that spells New York because he was
Yeah.
all over the New Yorker at the time, so he became synonymous with that.
Yeah.
And just the whole kind of Gershwin-y, Cole Porter sort of feel to some of the songs really, just kind of reemphasize that this is like a New York album, you know, the day in New York and night in New York.
Mhm.
Um, Absolutely phenomenal record. He's got some of his absolutely, obviously the massive single Stepping Out, Breaking Us in Two is
Yeah.
just an outstanding song. But then, the rest of the day side of the album, Cancer, Real Men, a slow song, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, I as much as I love Night and Day, I love the live tracks from the Night and Day tour all the more. In fact, and those first became available on the Joe Jackson Live 80 to 86 album, which
Yeah.
is another
Banger.
absolute corker. Um, I wish there was like a full release of the Night and Day tour, with all the different covers that they did and all the reinterpretations of the song. I mean, that was the great thing about this band, is it's where Jump and Jive kind of gave Joe, he gave himself permission to do something completely different. This continues that, even when they're doing covers of the Joe Jackson, catalog. Is She Really Going Out with Him is almost entirely a cappella. Uh, Fools in Love is nowhere near the original version, but it has more depth and grind and soul to it because it's primarily a bass-driven song at this point.
Yeah.
Um, Cancer, Look Sharp. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. I think the Night and Day album is a high point in Joe Jackson's catalog, but to me, it's not the highest point. I
Okay.
think there are other albums that happen subsequently that are just that much more phenomenal. But I think
I would
Night
agree.
and Day is when everything kind of comes together and he just starts to go.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Ken?
Yeah, I love this album. I remember buying it, and one of the first things I did was to record it on cassette so I could put it in my Walkman
At
and
the time? Uh-huh.
listen to it over and over and over again. Yeah. And a lot of it is his piano work. I mentioned in other videos that when it comes to jazz, piano is my primary go-to. Um, and it's just such a wonderful combination of that, you know, going back. There's, you know, you can feel the Cole Porter in it, and just those big full two-handed chords, you know, in that grand piano. It's just musically and sonically, it's just such a big sound, big full sound. And for a guitar player, I didn't miss guitar at all. Didn't miss it.
I really didn't notice it either, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for me, I mean, stepping out all over the radio, his biggest hit, arguably, um, breaking us into another banger of a track. To me, this is, and listening to it recently, because went out and got it a few months ago. I, this is Joe Jackson embracing New York. This is him in New York City. This is him living the New York life. Uh, yeah, I mean, and unapologetically so. And he was again at a point in his career where he just thought, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do whatever I want. And if people want to come along for the ride, record company included, come along. If not, well, then it's been great to know you. But I'm not going to be boxed in by what people are going to, or by what people are expecting me to do. So, and to me, it started with this album. As top 40 or as top 10 as it is in terms of hits, this album was his start of experimentation, of doing whatever he wanted to do musically. It was a big hit for A&M. So, okay, do whatever you want, Joe. We love it. You love it. You're wonderful. Keep
Yeah.
doing it. Keep doing it.
And I was always just really um, wondered why Steppin' Out was such a successful single, because it just didn't seem like single material to me.
It was the
Breaking
bass
Us in
line.
Two, yes, you know, but
It was the bass line. It was like repetitive bass line, dude. Like, and the piano chords that he used. Just the whole track itself. I can understand why it was a hit
okay.
myself, but
Yeah, I mean, lyrically, it's very, I'll call it joyful. And certainly that bass line is inescapable. And
a
even just
repetitive bass line.
melodically,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's a heck of a fun song to sing.
yeah,
Maybe people can't sing it well. I know I can't, but it's love kind of following the vocal lines, up and up and up.
yeah. No, I got you. I
Okay.
got you. All right. Um, Next one, number 8 on the list. Rush with Signals.
I got nothing.
Really?
Really?
Jim.
And you ignorant slut. I
Yeah.
don't even really know what to say to that. Well, that was heady college days during that time, and you were really huge into the music program and whatnot. So And I'm going to guess that even before college, Rush wasn't in your wheelhouse, right?
No, not really.
Okay. Um, this is not my favorite Rush album, but it has my all-time favorite Rush song on it, which is Subdivisions. Um, I think is just them at their high point of their powers. I mean, Neil's lyrics are so spot on. The arrangements by and the music by Lee and Lifeson, you know, it hasn't gone full synth pop at that point, or not even synth pop, but just synth as the main
Yeah,
thrust of the songs.
yeah.
Uh, Even though they're, you know, it was a harbinger of things to come, it still sounded great. Um, you know, Getty's synth solo is spot on, brother. Way to go.
Hmm.
Um, you know, again, I could kind of hear that, you know, if that was rephrased as like a, you know, Lonnie Smith organ solo, it would sound great. It's just a wonderful, you know, melodic line all the way through. Um, this was the studio follow-up to Moving Pictures, so it was a hard act to follow, but
Yeah.
it's really, really good. Um, you know, to me, Analog Kid, Digital Man, The Weapon, um, Losing It, you know, are kind of the other standout tracks on the album. Um, I remember having a not a heated discussion, but a discussion with a gal in college who was a huge Rush fan, who thought that this album was kind of like the beginning of the end to her. And she didn't point to the synth sound so much, but she pointed to the lyrics to Countdown, which she felt were pretty darn pedestrian by Neil Peart standards.
Oh God.
Um, and you know, I get it. Um, I don't think it's bad, but it certainly doesn't have there's just something about the way the lyrics come together that they don't seem to have, I'll call it the poetry as like Analog Kid, Subdivisions, Losing It. And maybe that's because Peart was trying to kind of fit into the musical framework that you know Getty and Alex had put together. I don't know. But there is
Hmm.
something about Countdown that's that doesn't the Countdown lyrics that don't have that Rush magic to them. I mean, it's still wonderful. You know, I remember watching the first space shuttle launch, and it taps into all those, you know, amazing feelings there quite well. But again, there's just something about the lyrics that just make it seem a little just kind of pedestrian by Rush standards.
Okay.
But
Um,
the whole rest of the album, you know, is you know top five Rush for me.
well, I remember this thing was from this album. I remember Subdivisions, especially the video for it, and it resonating with me. Like I mean, yeah, feeling singled out, feeling, you know, it tapped into a nerve for me that it never really went away. You know,
Yep.
and by the way, if you watch the video, when the father throws his homework at the kid, his math book, I had that same math book in high school, in the video. So, um,
Very close to home.
yes, I think that I mean, this was the last album to be produced by Terry Brown. Uh, I think they wanted to make a break with what they were doing previously, and they wanted to move into, okay, a year or two late into a new decade with a new sound, a new approach. Even with this album, New World Man, top notch, top notch. I mean, uh, lyrically, I think people tend to. If I was Neil Peart, if someone was if I was doing an interview and someone kept asking me like, "What did you mean by this? What did you mean by that? Why did you go into this realm of you know of subconscious thinking and just And I would be like, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. Just read into it what you need to read into it. I don't think he was one. I mean, obviously he was one to have serious lyrical thought as to what he wanted to write down. But at the same time, I also think that it was for him, it was open to interpretation, which a lot of, I think, start again, a good amount of artists do in terms of their lyrical content. I think it's a strong album. I need to listen to it some more, but yeah, it was all over FM radio in Toronto, uh, and but I do see it as a transitional album for the band. They're not fully into the Hold Your Fire territory just yet, but they're leaning that way. They are definitely leaning that way. So, but it's still a fantastic album.
Yeah. And it's recommended, man.
Yeah,
I think it's a pretty darn solid album.
definitely. Definitely. Okay.
Is that the face of someone who can't get past Getty's vocals? Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I have my membership card right here. So yeah, can't get past Getty's vocal. So
Okay.
There's a card.
there's a club. We're a
Okay.
club. Yeah.
All right. Number 9. We're closing off this list with one I've never really listened to. Midnight Oil. 1098 7654321. Jim. I've got
Nothing.
nothing. Ken.
Big Zero.
Okay, moving on. Number 10 on the list. We're ending this with a bang. Did we cover Imperial Bedroom?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we're moving on. See, this is the, ladies and gentlemen, this is the difficulty when you have a list and you've got a lot of albums that you've covered, you forget which ones you've covered already. So, Sparks, Angst in My Pants.
Ah,
I've never heard Sparks. I know of them. I've never heard the album, never heard them. So,
Have you heard the single Cool Places?
nope. If I have, I don't remember. Honestly, it's. I do know that they approached Brian May to join their band at one point,
okay.
and
All right.
he politely turned them down. Whereas Freddie Mercury said, if it was me, I would have told them to fuck off and leave me alone. Uh, but
Well,
that's just him, right? Um,
there you go.
Sparks, Angst in My Pants. Jim.
Not a damn thing.
Ken.
Okay. I'd like to take what Jim said and expand upon it.
Not a real damn thing. What? Not a whole damn thing. I was like, what?
Double what Jim said. So take what Jim said and square it.
Okay. We're gonna go for Cubed. I have nothing to say about this album. Um, I know of
Okay.
the band. I know of the band. I just never paid attention to their music.
Me neither.
So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we started out with a bang. We ended off with a damn whimper. Technical glitches and all. Um,
Tell us what we're missing on these albums. We don't.
exactly. For the albums that we are missing on that we don't know that much about, please let us know what we're missing and give us your opinions on
Yeah.
the albums that we've missed that we don't know much about and the albums that we did talk about in this series. Uh, we want to get a dialogue going. So again, please let us know what you think of these albums. And yeah, I want to thank both Jim and Ken, or as I like to call them, Frick and Frack, for coming along with me on this interesting journey of all that in 1982. And we will be back with more episodes coming up. Please click like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep yourselves on top of any new content I've got coming up. All right. And I will see you soon, or we will see you soon with more videos. Bye for now.